Blog Talk Radio.
And in those days there were giants in the land, and the sons of the angels of God looked upon the daughters of men and found them fair, and took of them wives, and their sons became of old great men of renown. So they have been mixing with us on a genetic level since the time of Enoch and Ezekiel's will.
Here on Earth we're intrigued by the sun, moon, and stars, and imagine there's got to be planets like ours. So conceive of a face on the surface of Mars, so in need of a meaning and purpose we lost. That indeed they believe that these might be our gods, or that maybe with time we'll do right and evolve and eventually reach what they seek and then solve all the problems of man. But they really don't know that they fall in the works of our hands, all but just filthy rags. So we travel the lands to dig up our past, time elapses, and with it are much of the facts. Some imagine that God came in alien craft. They react in this way, they're so desperate for meaning and purpose, but satanic service, they know that they have evil motives. Am I making you nervous? I'm just scratching the surface. The signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. See the signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. In the blink of an eye, all believers will be raptured. Anyone left receives a mark or the caption. This leader will arise, claim his origins are alien, possessed by Satan on the side of the Nephilim. Profess those who left held us back from evolving, and now that they're gone, we'll solve all of Earth's problems. The worship of any one God will be halted. We'll evolve into gods and ourselves be exalted. They'll play on these lines, and in time they'll devise and arrive at a plan that will help hypnotize all the ones left behind, the spiritually blind. He's stolen their souls, now he's stealing their minds. It's already started, we're seeing the signs. Just study the word, prophecies all aligned. They'll chop off the heads of all those who fight at one earth, one world. Aren't you excited? The signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. See the signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. Where will you be in the year 2012? Are they casting a spell they're not ready to tell? It's time to reveal what they tried to keep veiled. Pure evil they hail and they sell it so well. He fell from the heavenly realms where he dwelled, a once beautiful angel that tried to rebel. Expelled from the light into darkness and hell, now a serpent and snake with reptilian scales. He wears a disguise with angelic wings and mimics the truth with a lie so obscene. He always repeats the same thing he told Eve, that you'll be supreme, a king or a queen, that you can evolve to an enlightened being, a god of your own that can do anything. He feeds on our souls with this fraudulent scheme in so many ways, but it's all just the same. See the signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. See the signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near.
Why hide yourself with, creating UFO crafts and things like that? Why that deception if that's indeed what's going on?
The creatures figured out that there was one way that they could frighten mankind, and that is to present themselves as technologically superior beings from physical UFOs.
Why would they want to abduct human beings?
UFO abduction might not be caused by physical occupants, but from creatures living in perhaps what we would call another dimension.
Posing as occupants.
Yes, the same type of interfering, harassing, paraphysical creature in every culture worldwide.
Welcome, friends, and thank you for joining me this last day of November before we move into what will be the final month of the year and a quick entrance into 2014. Which will be an interesting year in that it holds for us 4 blood red moons. I believe it's 2014 and 2015. Over the course of these 2 years, on very significant feast days, there will be these blood red moons, which we know in the Word, it specifies how in the last days there will be signs in the sun, moon, and the stars in the heavens. I scheduled earlier a show that I wanted to do on as in the days of Noah were, as the days of Noah were. And next week we'll talk about that. But in speaking about that and its connections with this particular show, there was signs in the celestial heavens which were significant to those days. And for those that have followed my work, you know that I talk about the destroyer and utilize a lot of ancient texts which are also very revealing in their introspection when you tie them into biblical prophecy and to what Christ was alluding to in Matthew chapter 24. So we will expound upon that more so next week, but this will be a very interesting, to say the least, and it always is, but we should always be perpetually ready for the return of the Son at any time. Be wise virgins, have your wicks trimmed, in your oil in your lamps, and be kind to others and to yourself and to your loved ones. Do what you can to bring others to remembrance and to help them to understand the Gospels in a way that they may never have prior. Because so many of you now have the eyes to see, the ears to hear, and the mind to understand, which most of those that are still seeking, that any initiative to put forth such effort, a lot of them still have not found the answers. And this goes to a great deal to the young seekers and to the older seekers, because it doesn't matter what age you are. When I think it all depends on your intent and your will and your love. That if you have a love of the truth and you desire it more than anything else, that the Father and the Son will lead. It depends on the student. When the student is ready, the teacher and the lessons, they will appear. And the Father and the Son, they utilize many different mediums, including us as the ecclesia, as the church, as a fellowship, as a people, as humanity, and also a lot of what is the creation to bring forth these answers. And that for individuals like myself that have had a knack for wanting to write and have done introspection in such ways, it is my opinion that writing has a way of introducing us to ourselves, and in soliciting information which connects us to the divine, much like dreams as a medium. And that the Father and the Son, as muse, will lead us in such introspection to answers and to profound, very profound revelations. I know that in the course of all the things that I've written in my life, I've learned a lot of things from them. And there's been many a times I've said after having completed such things as a poem or an article or even a book, how sometimes it feels almost certain aspects of it are outside of yourself, and that is the way that the Most High, the Creator, speaks to us, is in utilizing muse to guide us and direct us in such ways so that we learn from the things that we write, and that these things can also help others. And that's the beauty of it. And when you have, because writing for me is almost like a moment of prayer. You know, I take the time to be quiet and to be still and to be with my thoughts, my prayers, my hopes and my wishes for world and for a relationship with the Father and the Son, because that's what I'm seeking first and foremost. And when you have such priority for your life and you utilize, you know, for others it's writing music that the soul, the spirit speaks to you in those ways. But for me, it's through a pen. But anyways, I'm your host, Dan Garcia. This is FallenAngels.tv, and I've got an interesting show lined up for you today. And if you have tried to do a little bit of research on this topic yourselves, you're going to find a lot of what is disinformation out there, or what I'm going to label disinformation, and not even necessarily for the writers that have done, you know, just incredible research on many other aspects of truth, and even well studied and well versed in so many things. There are even the most well-intentioned researchers, especially on this subject when it comes to the Brotherhood of the Snake. There are twists and turns that I don't think a lot of people have clarity upon. I'll just say it like that. And not that they are purposely trying to put disinformation out there, but that their beliefs are slighted in such way that the information that is put out on the Brotherhood of the Snake, or the Brotherhood of the Serpent, or the Brotherhood of the Dragon, which are all very ancient secret societies, and in my opinion all connected to who we call the Nakash, the feathered serpent, the winged guardian of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that this particular being has been worshipped, respected, and revered by ancient societies and civilizations for even prior to the coming of modern man and the creation of Adam and Eve, and their fall from paradise and their inception into this world, into the world of what would be the dragon, that wise old serpent that deceiveth even the whole world. And so I want to clarify some of these things, because, and I'll touch upon some of the information that is out there. And if you look into it, the Brotherhood of the Serpent, you will find that it is attributed to a Sumerian god with little g, a Sumerian god named Ea, a Prince Ea, whose father was named Anu. And that this Prince Ea, once he arrived here to this planet, and he was with the first group of Anunnaki that arrived after the exile of the Nubarian king, Lalu, And Alalu was the one that was exiled to die on Mars, and who his face is the one that was represented as the face on Mars. Ea came with a group of 50 Anunnaki. Now, those that have written about the Brotherhood of the Serpent and the Brotherhood of the Snake, they cite and they give allusion to Ea, who later became Enki, Lord of the Earth. He's portrayed as a serpent, and yet they also cite him as being benevolent, and they also attribute him as being the creator of the human race, of modern humanity. And I'm going to get into this story as well, because I've read all of the Sumerian literature, and I'm very familiar with those texts as well as the biblical. And so I'm going to clarify some points, because it doesn't say that he was the creator of. In the Sumerian text, it calls them the two, Adamu and Tiamat. But that these beings were cited as being what the Sumerians called the Lulu, or the primitive worker. And that for those that have read from my Sons of God and the information that I embark in that book, I show that the primitive worker that was created by the Sumerians, the arrival of the Anunnaki initially, was more of a Bigfoot type of creature, and that they manipulated and even engaged in direct bestiality with this particular creature in order to create a hybrid being from what would be the genetic stock of their own, the arrival of their own people. And so, anyways, I was reading something that Watcher Ruth had put into the chat room. And if you have any questions, certainly post them into the chat room, as I know this is a very difficult subject for people to understand in its fullness, and especially it can be confusing, because there are two creatures spoken about in both Genesis, in Genesis chapter 1 and 2, as well as in the Sumerian text. The Sumerians refer to them as the primitive worker, and the second one as the civilized man. And it's the civilized man that is connected to the ancestors of Adam and Eve. And I'll get to that story, because you have to have discernment when you read the Sumerian texts, because you have to align them with what is spoken about and written within the biblical text. Because and here's another thing that is confusing for most people, that once you begin to look into the full summation of mythology that is available in all of the ancient wisdom texts that are available out there, the Sumerian teachings are cited as being the oldest teachings on the planet, which they are if you discount everything that happened prior to the flood of Noah's day. Because even the Sumerian teachings, they are not even the first teachings that came up after the flood. That there were other, like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. And there was a group of people called the Bulgarians or the Thracians that preceded the Sumerians by 2,000 years. And I happened to have a friend that sent me a text that they had found in that area, and it's called the Book of Adam and Ua, E-U-A, like the Book of Adam and Eve. And there's information about it in the 14th chapter of my book on the Sons of God, and how it goes back to this king named Sitartes. But anyways, so the information that is found in the Hebrew Bible actually predates and precedes the Sumerian teachings. And I know it's difficult for people to understand that, because even science, all the cultures of the world, they will tell you that the Sumerian teachings are the oldest, and that the Bible and the books of prophecy, and especially the Torah, that they are based on those Sumerian teachings, which is not true. And that it's actually reversed. But that there was also things, this hieroglyphics and different symbolisms that were utilized even during the time of Atlantis and the destruction which led up to what would be the global ice age. And so I want to expound upon some of this when I'm talking about and tying together this information on the Brotherhood of the Serpent, the Brotherhood of the snake or the dragon, because as I show also in my 6th book, The Sons of God, it's all connected to the Revelation 12, the dragon which led astray and deceiveth the whole world. And that there's various embodiments of this feathered serpent, even going back to the Sumerian depictions of who they were as winged reptiles. That the winged reptiles are also the feathered serpent that is spoken about in the traditions of the Mayans, the Aztecs, even the Anasazi and the Hopi people here in the American West, the rattlesnake people, as they are called, the Kachinahe. Whatever it is you want to call them, it's all the same beings, the star beings, the ancient aliens, the what we call the Nephilim or the fallen angels. It's all the same thing. And so, to get a better grasp of the story, because first know that the Brotherhood of the Snake, according to the ancient Egyptian and the ancient Sumerian text, Ea, or this who we were talking about as the Prince Enki, who his title means, or epithet means, Lord of the Earth, that before his brother arrived, and his brother arrived with the second wave of Anunnaki to arrive here to the planet. His brother's name is Enlil, and he is cited as, his epithet is Lord of the Command. But before his arrival here, Enki was Lord of the Earth, or Ea was Lord of the Earth, called then Enki. And so the period before the arrival of Enlil, Enki ruled upon the planet, and he was the one that formed Eridu and the place called Eden, or a place called Eden. And so in the Sumerian text, it cites and speaks about all the different experimentations and the different efforts, the various things that they had to go through in order to bring forth what would be the primitive worker. And how in the story they were cited, the reason that they came here and the reason they needed gold and the reason that they were having to mine for this gold. And, some of the oldest mines on the planet were mines that were found to have already existed, that were already dug up. And, those that don't know about the Anunnaki and the fallen angels and their presence or their interactions here on the planet, they don't know who to attribute those particular things having come into being, even like with the megalithic structures that we find worldwide. Science does not know how to explain that. All these megalithic type structures, they give the accounting that the supposed hunter-gatherer peoples that had no high technology and no capability, that they somehow built these structures which are still in existence today. When we build cities and, modern humanity now currently builds cities and structures that, even though they may last a few thousand years, they are largely weathered and decimated to such a degree that they're unrecognizable. And yet we have these all over the world, cultures and civilizations and megalithic type structures which are still as almost as pristine as they were in the day that they were created. And how over thousands of years of history and the ravages of time and of weathering, that they still are, many of them are still in similar state as to what they were back in the days of old, or what the Bible speaks about as the former generations. And so I want to clarify for the listeners and for those that may later come to this show how it is that the Anunnaki teachings, as well as the biblical teachings, they are speaking about both of these type of creatures, the primitive worker and also the civilized man. And you can also look, if you look into the archives of this show here on blogtalkradio.com, I've done shows in the past where I've relayed all of the teachings from these ancient accounts, and I've read them verbatim to help you understand the two different beings that are spoken about in Genesis 1 and 2, as well as side by side. I did one show on the primitive worker and another show on the civilized man to help you understand directly from the source how this story lines up and parallels what we are speaking about here. Because what we are finding and what I am seeing in the world is that so many are claiming, even the scientists that are at a loss on how to explain all these megalithic structures, they're jumping off the Darwin evolution bandwagon and jumping on the now new, the neoteric ancient alien bandwagon. And they're claiming that what we could not find in the fossil record as a missing link that would unite the ancestors of ape and man, that now is tied to the interdiction of the ancient aliens here upon this planet. And that's why we haven't found it. And so now they are talking about how it is, and they're so quick to jump onto this new premise, this new basis for understanding the history of humanity and the prehistory of what is locked into the archaeological and geological records of the earth and the planet. And so this is going to be the new religion. This will be the new science. You watch, mark my words, that within a few years, it's already happening, and the Word reminds us and warns us of this as the strong delusion. And myself and many of my friends have come out and tried to warn you on this so that we could be ahead of the curve, so that you could remember the things that we've been saying all these years, because you're going to see it. We're already seeing it. And so now the new thing is, and the Ancient Alien series is pushing this worldwide. And there's so many just wise and very clever and well-researched and people that have been studying these esoteric and anomalous things for decades now, and that are very well published and have just incredible resources and criteria for being called experts, and they're being paraded as such, that many individuals now are on this ancient alien bandwagon, and they are pushing the same thing that when you research the Brotherhood of the Serpent and Snake, it speaks about Ea or Enki as being the creator of humanity. They are giving, and a lot of people are believing them because they are ripe, and because what happens is when people study alternative history and the alternative mythology, they read all the ancient accounts and they start with the Sumerian lore because they think that's the oldest. And having begun with the Sumerian teachings, they believe that all the Hebrew teachings come from them, and that they are just counterfeits of what is in the ancient Sumerian accounts. And so they try to go directly to the source, which if you thought the Sumerian teachings were older, of course that's where you want to go. You want to read those and get a grasp for why it is that the supposedly later Hebrew teachings, how they came to speak about what they speak about, and why read the Bible if you can just read the Sumerian teachings and you get the ancient history in its original context. And so they are discounting and excluding any kind of research on what is the biblical side of, and these are, this is what the Creator gave to humanity in order for them to make sense of what has been lost and forbidden. And so they're excluding that. And I myself had done so for 20 years. When I was involved in the New Age and I had studied all of the Sumerian teachings for a long, long period of time, had studied all the Zechariah Sitchin books and read the English translations of the Sumerian text wherever I could find them, reading ancient books like the Qumran Bible and things like that. I had excluded to a large part the traditional word. And it wasn't until I was brought back full circle to the Gospels and to the extra biblical texts and the Book of Enoch and Jasher and Jubilees and all these other things, Nag Hammadi codices, and study of all this information, that I started to see and have discernment upon what was not being said and what was being left out of, and how the Sumerian teachings, where they, as the conquerors, and you know, if the devil's going to write his own history and steal the worship and steal the glory from the Most High and the Son, why would he not cite himself as the creator of modern humanity and as the freer of the eternal spirit and the knowledge of humanity? Why would he not? So that's the thing you have to, and even the Masons, the Freemasons, who are the elites of the world at the upper levels, the upper echelons, for a large part, they also may exclude what is study of the Gospels. Even like for Bill Schnoblin in his testimony of how he, was also, once he was involved in, he was a high-level warlock and involved in all the different satanic cults, and he was told to later become a Catholic priest and then become a Mormon. That it wasn't until he became a Mormon and was introduced to the Gospels that he realized that he was one of them, like the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and that the truth was revealed to him. Same thing for me. I went, and for a lot of people, they never make it to that other side. And so I give all glory to the Most High and to the Son that I was brought full circle and I was brought home. And that having studied and not learned about the Gospels from a preacher or pastor or a minister or from a church, that I learned them directly from reading them after I had spent 2 decades studying about all the New Age stuff. And that studying all the Gospels and the extra biblical books and all that I was brought to revelation and discernment that was not traditionally taught in mainstream churches. And about a lot of those things, and I've written books about those things and have spoken about and done radio work on all those things for a long period of time now, and I've been harassed and ostracized and made fun of and ridiculed and beaten up and just all the same things that you have when you've tried to share some of this information once you've been brought to truth. And so, just to help you better understand, as far as the Brotherhood of the Serpent and the Snake, how that all tied into with what we have as the Freemasons, even the Shriners of this day and age, the secret societies, the Knights of all the different Knights of Malta, Knights of Columbus, Knights of this, Knights of that. There's so many different front groups that are parading as Christian organizations. We spoke a little bit about this last week. But anyways, all these groups are splinters off from the original Brotherhood of the Snake, which was, when you research and begin your study on it, was created by this Prince Ea, this Sumerian god, who's also, in my work, I show that he takes on various other embodiments and names. Some of those are Oannes, Dagon. It's spoken, the Old Testament speaks about Dagon, that he was the Philistine god, that Goliath and his brothers worshipped Dagon, and that when they took the Ark of the Covenant from the people, and the Most High allowed them to do so, that they took it and placed it in the temple of Dagon. And Dagon is another one of those embodiments, or Dogon, what the Dogon people worship and call Nomo, or what Credo Mutwa calls the Chitauri or the Chitauli, the Serpent people. It's all the same thing. And I don't want to bore you with, repeating all these things, but I think it's important, like with the way that the Word repeats the genealogies of humanity, and how for so long, when those of us that didn't know about, the two different bloodlines and the two lineages of the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, and we didn't understand this ancient war between these two people and these two lines, why it was that the lineages were repeated over and over and over, and he begat he, and who begat who, and all that, and we would skip over all of that, thinking that, why did the Bible include all those things? What does that have to do with anything? But until you know, then it makes sense. Then it clicks. Then you are brought to understanding on why it is that the Bible repeats itself over and over and over. And then you have to also understand that the seed of the serpent, the line of Cain, who are connected to the Brotherhood of the snake and the serpent and the dragon, that they have, since the very inception of history and the sharing of knowledge and such stories, have tried to eradicate and to disappear the truth that would contradict what they want to be known as truth. That they have, over time in history and since the very beginning, have been trying to keep you ignorant, dumbed down, and in darkness. And it's only by the grace of the Most High and His love for us that He has assigned holy people that have wanted to know the truth, giving them the gospel so that we could even have a chance to understand the powers that are aligned against us. And that's why the Nag Hammadi codices, were disappeared for thousands of years. But they were preserved for a time, and this is that time. And that the Book of Enoch is as hard and as persistent as the powers that be were in eradicating the Book of Enoch and his testimony against the fallen angels, their fathers, how it also has been preserved for us in this day and age, we being the fig tree generation. And so it's only by the grace of the Most High and His Son that we have the ancient writings, and that we have chance, especially in this generation, to study things that many of the ancestors, especially during the Dark Ages, and to those periods when the Catholic Church asserted its power and disappeared so much what is available, and canonized a very small number of the books so that people wouldn't even look outside of what was the official, okay, you guys can study this, but no more. And even that, they didn't even want us to have that. Even the 80-book canon was decimated and dwindled. And so you have to understand the powers that are aligned against you, because they don't want you to have the knowledge and the wisdom that I'm going to be speaking to you about today. And so, as far as the creation of modern Adam and Eve, that when the Sumerians, the Anunnaki, when they created this primitive worker, the Lulu, this was one of those Bigfoot type of creatures, and that this being is much like an animal. It's not like the Adam that was given the breath of life. And that if the Anunnakis are our creators, how could they create the spirit? They can't. Satan, he cannot create the spirit. And that when Adam and Eve came into being, he was a marriage of both the forces on high as well as to what is the physical, the bodily form, which is of this fallen world. And that now we are an amalgamation. Our spirit comes from the Most High, the Creator that blew into us the spirit and gave us the breath of life. And that of the body, the vessels that are ashes to ashes, dust to dust. And that even though, I think that the animals have souls, and that, there will definitely be animals in heaven, that there's a difference between the Adam, the modern, what the Sumerians cite as the civilized man, and that which was prior, and especially with this particular being, that even when it was crossbred, it was able to accommodate and was able to do certain menial tasks, but it did not have the wisdom and the capacity to stand and comprehend like we do now. The fallen angels, they did. They were created in the image of the Most High as well. But even their children that were born, the giants that were born from them, they are excluded from salvation. And they will be eradicated as if they had never been. But and I'm going to talk more about this in next week's show, because I know that I'm not going to be able to cover a lot of what I want to talk about in because I know we're quickly running out of time, and also I want to stay on topic as far as these secret societies. But I will also talk more about, because when I'm going to be speaking about as the days of Noah were, I will be talking about what was going on prior to the flood of Noah's day, and why it was that the Father and the Son had to bring on the flood as Noah's day, and how it was focused on wiping clean and bringing a chance for renewal against what the fallen angels and also the rebel angels had done here on this planet. And how because when they started to create, even their creation of the primitive workers, they created a lot of hybrid beings. And that these hybrid beings, it led to great folly here on this planet. And that there were many creatures and beings which were very evil. Were very evil in the things that they did, and the natural order was brought out of harmony. And so we're going to be speaking about that, and also talking about from the Book of the Giants and the Book of Enoch as to the conditions of the world and what was going on during that time that led to the Father and the Son wanting to wipe out completely the geological and the archaeological record that predated the ancestors of Adam and Eve, or the seed of the woman, the line of Seth. And so you'll definitely want to be here for that show, because we're going to expound upon the things that I'm covering here. But I'm also going to talk about the destruction, because there are previous destructions, like the time of Atlantis. And I've covered this in other shows where I've talked about the prior times and talked about the destruction of the fallen angels previous to the flood of Noah, because that was just the most recent in a long series of cataclysms that were brought upon the Anunnaki, the Nephilim, the fallen angels, the rebel angels, and later upon the Watchers. Because the Watchers, when they fell, they were a group of holy angels that fell during the time of Enoch's father, Yared, and that they also left their place of habitation, their first estate, and they joined and became part of the demons. They joined the rebel angels, which were already here, because they were cast out a long time prior, the second day, in fact, and that they had been banished to this solar system and were part of who we cite as the Anunnaki in their arrival here on this planet, and how what was the period of the ancient aliens or the sky people and their involvement with many of the primitive cultures worldwide, how all that is locked into the mythology of the prior times, or what the Egyptians cite as Zep Tepe. And so I'm going to cover that as well. But just to bring us kind of up to where we are now, when you look into the beginning, as far as the Brotherhood of the Serpent, or the Brotherhood of the Snake, in its original, when the Sumerian text and the Egyptian text cite the mystery schools as having first been created, they will tell you that Ea had done it to share wisdom and light among humanity. And that they also will tell you that Ea is who is cited as being Jehovah or Yahweh in the Old Testament. Because many of the secret societies and the mystery schools, they consider the Old Testament God to be a wrathful and a homicidal type of God, in that he told Joshua to wipe out every man, woman, and child, and he brought the flood on to wipe out humanity, and so they are citing the Old Testament God Yahuwah, Yahweh, or Jehovah, as it's called in Germany, with being the Satan of old. They've got it twisted. And the secret societies, they teach this as well. They say that the Old Testament God, Yahweh, is the evil God, and that Lucifer, or Satan, is the God that tried to free us, to give us a chance for, life and to exist on this planet, and to give us access to knowledge and pleasure. Prometheus giving us the fire. They speak about this in their particular teachings, and this is the twist, the slant that they give upon it. And so the ancient secret societies, they will tell you that Enki created humanity, and that being a benevolent God, because another thing that you have to know is in the Sumerian teachings, the person or the god that goes to who is cited as being what's his name? Zayustra, who we know as Noah. In the Sumerian teachings, they call him Zayustra, and there's a different slant on how Noah is taught to build the ark. And in the slant in the Sumerian teachings is that Ea, or Enki, he was going against his brother's wishes. Because once his brother came here, he was known as Master of the Command. And he was the one that had authority over Enki. That once he arrived here to the earth with the second incursion of the Anunnaki, what really would be the third if you count Alalu, that he was the one that took over the Eden, and Enki moved to what was called the Abzu. And that was down in South America. They were mining for gold down in that, not South America, South Africa, and the African continent. And that Enlil took and remained over the Middle Eastern area, and that he was the one that had built Baalbek and the area near Baalbek as his particular domain. And he's the one who we come to know as Zeus, the father of the gods. He was the one that in the pantheon of the gods and goddesses is the one known as Zeus or Apollo. Enki, because he became Lord of the waters and over the Abzu, he's the one that we know as Poseidon or Neptune, the one that is referenced in Plato's work as taking a human wife and becoming the one that sired Atlas and the Atlantean kings. So anyways, in the story, the Sumerian story of Noah, it gives the twist, and the reason they cite Enki as being a benevolent god and his being associated to the Yahweh or the Yahuwah of the Old Testament is because of this story. His brother has decreed that they see and they know that the ice cap that is on Antarctica, the continent of Antarctica at the time, they see that when the next flyby of Nibiru, their planet, that once it crosses into this plane and comes close to the Earth, that the ice cap is going to slip off of the continent of Antarctica, and that once it does so, that it's going to create mass devastation, a huge tidal wave that would destroy a lot of their prior and previous efforts. And they attribute this to because they also call who we call Yahuwah or Yahweh, or what others call Jehovah, they call him the creator of all. And so they know that they are not God. They speak about this in the Sumerian teachings. And you'll find this referenced in many different places where they speak about the creator of all. And they know that the creator of all is sending destruction, and that the ice cap is going to fail. And so Enlil, because he is Lord of the Command, he basically tells all of the Anunnaki to have nothing to do with the saving of humanity or mankind, that he's going to allow them all to die, that basically the experiment had gotten out of hand and that he wants them all to die. And so Enki, in the story, he's given a dream from the creator of all, and he's told to go to Zaustra and to speak to what was basically a wooden wall. He speaks to a wooden wall, and in speaking to the wooden wall, so he wouldn't break his oath to his brother, he spares and he teaches Noah, or Zaustra, teaches him how to build, tells him to build an ark, that there's great destruction coming. And so in the Sumerian story, one of the minor gods, one of the children of Enki, one of the little minor deities, he actually navigates, that he takes the control of this particular ark, and it's not an ark in the Sumerian teachings, but a submarine that goes down up under the goes under the waters and doesn't just float on top, and that one of the minor gods is with him in order to spare Noah. So that's the twist. And so the secret societies, because of this one story, they will cite Enki as being a benevolent god and as being the one that spared humanity in the flood of Noah's day. And a lot of the researchers and people that are trying to discover truth, because they believe the Sumerian teachings are older than the teachings of the Hebrews, which, the Hebrew teachings go back even before our fall here to this particular planet, that Adam was given books in Hebrew in paradise before we ever were here on this particular planet. Adam was not just a tiller of the soil, he was a priest. But anyways, even in the Jewish traditions, there's a book called the Book of Rahzel, which, for those that want to know more and look into it, it's called the Book of Creation, and it's actually cited as being the book, the first book that was given to Adam, written by God and given to Adam when he was banished out of paradise. And so all of that you can find by looking into those kind of things. But anyways, and so Enki, he, in the Sumerian teachings, he talks to Zaustra and tells him about the slipping of what would be the ice cap and how that would create the global floods. And so the secret societies and the Brotherhood of the Snake, the Serpent, and the Dragon, they teach it this way. And they teach that Enki, or who we know as the Feathered Serpent, that is Yahweh or Jehovah of the Old Testament. Just so you know. Okay, moving on to some of the later, and I'm going to come check the chat room in just a minute. So if you had a question and it has already scrolled up and I missed it, please repost it, and I'll check here in just a couple minutes, because if I'm confusing you in any way, I want to bring clarity to that. And I don't mind stopping. I can always set another show to bring further information about this. So, going up to the time of Egypt. In the time of Egypt, they will tell you that many of the mystery schools came into being during that time, and that the original intent of the mystery schools, as established by Enki, that he was benevolent, he wanted to spread wisdom and light and truth, and that was the whole purpose for creating the secret societies, and that his original intent was of one of benevolence. But that once it got to the time of the Egyptians and the creation of the mystery schools, the they were trying to impart or show that Enki was actually, even though they say that he was a benevolent personage, that they were trying to slander him. And so that's when he became associated with Satan and the Prince of Darkness and all these other names, of which we know him by. And so they talk about how during the time of Egypt, the mystery schools, they were trying to slander his original intent, and because there was a war between the factions of the Enlilites and the Enkyites, there was war among the Anunnaki between themselves, and they did break into factions. How Enki was being slandered, and so these mystery schools, these secret societies, they say that their intent then became to hide the truth and the knowledge and to preserve it for only a few, an elect. And this elect was associated with those that were of the hybrid lines prior to the creation of Adam and Eve. And when I say hybrid lines, I'm talking about those that were part Anunnaki and part the primitive worker. Not talking about the Watcher rebellion and their mating with the daughters of Cain. That was something long after, that we're going back to prior to Adam and Eve. And so the pharaohs, the cone heads, you'll see the depictions of those hybrid pharaohs that had the elongated skulls. These were the people, the hybrid children of what was the Anunnaki, and they were the results of the mixing between the Anunnaki and the primitive worker. And the primitive worker were the Bigfoot type of people, that they were covered, they were tall, their arms were very lengthy, and that they were covered in red fur, as cited in the Anunnaki themselves. And I cite this information in my book, Sons of God, if you want to know more and you want to, get the what the Sumerians say for themselves as to what the original creature looked like, the primitive worker. And so these were the beings that were like a third kind of being here on this planet. They were hybrid, they were strange, and they were different than the Anunnaki themselves, but also different than what were the primitive worker people. And these were the priestly class. A lot of times you'll see on the Egyptian walls depictions of humans with strange heads, animal-type heads. Berosus gives us accounting of this particular time, and this was from, before Atlantis, and after. That even in the Emerald Tablet, it speaks about how with the destruction of Atlantis, they then went to the land of Chem. The land of Chem meaning Egypt. And that they found there the hairy barbarians, as cited by the Emerald Tablets themselves, and that they mixed with these people and they ruled over them. And that the Anunnaki also, when the destruction of Atlantis occurred, two factions. There were already two factions. One, the Brotherhood of Light, the Sons of Light, or the Sons of the Law, and the Brotherhood of Darkness, or the Sons of Belial. That they broke off and they went into 4 different parts of the world. That Egypt was one of them, India, South America, and I also believe that it was what was called Japan, or Japan, way back in the day. And anyways, they there were these four cultures and civilizations that came up after the destruction of Atlantis, all simultaneously. And it was a result of these Brotherhood of the Serpent and the Snake breaking off in different directions and going to different parts of the world. And so that's why you find in the archaeological, in the geological record, you'll see that these cultures and civilizations all came up in rapid fashion. And that even though that they were separated from each other, they had similar construction methods, as well as the way that they had established their societies. And they established caste systems as well. And that India still to this day, worships the fallen angels as the Hindu gods, or the pantheon of these multiple gods. And also that they still have this caste system that was set up by them so long ago. And the reason that the fallen angels established these caste systems was so that those hybrid children that were related and associated to them, they put them in power. They were the pharaohs. They were the priestly class. They were the ones that ruled, that made all the decisions. And all those that were not connected to them and that were excluded from the brotherhoods, the mystery schools, and these elitist organizations, these secret societies, they were the ones that were not to have this knowledge and these secrets. They were the ones that were, given menial tasks and just kept as being the common people. And so they were kept in ignorance, kept in darkness. And that's the way that the power structure had been passed on and had been protected from even before the creation of Adam and Eve. And that this power structure is still in place worldwide. That even the royals of, the royal family, even though that they say that they're just, in the UK, that they don't really have any true authority. They're the ones that really rule. Parliament and the way that the government works, all that is that's the real face, the mask of what is, the Oz. Because the true power structure governs from behind the mask. Same way here in America. We have a monarchy in place in America. We're not a democracy. We weren't even supposed to be a democracy. We were supposed to be a republic where, one man had one vote and that we elected our representatives. And that's all the illusion parading as reality. That's what they want you to see, but that's not what is real. Just like with the New World Order, the eye at the top of the Illuminati pyramid. And another thing, the secret societies, they will tell you that the Rothschild family, Adam Weishaupt, all these different people that were told to, help in the creation of the secret societies, even like Albert Pike, that these were the people that were the power behind the Illuminati and the New World Order. That's not true either. The true power behind the New World Order, the Illuminati, and even the governments of the world today, they are the powers, the principalities, the rulers of darkness, the wickedness in high places that are connected to the rebel angels, the fallen angels, the Anunnaki, and the feathered serpent, the dragon of old. That's the real power. It's the real power behind governments is not even a human one. That in order to really understand this war, you have to understand that it goes back to prior to the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, and Eve being the mother of all living and giving birth to both lines. That the struggle predates all of that, and even modern humanity's displacement here upon the planet, on earth. That it goes back to the war in heaven and the separation of light and darkness, and the introduction of the Son to what was the sons of God, and Lucifer becoming envious, jealous, and wanting to be as the Most High, and vowing then to set up his throne above the stars of God, and to take over the mountain of God. It goes back to that. So the separation of light and darkness, the division of the powers of good and evil, that is what we're talking about as far as the power behind the Illuminati and the New World Order. The Rothschild family, the 13 Illuminati bloodlines, that's just the human face of what is the ancient serpent. That's the mask that is shown publicly so that we have somebody to blame. But that it goes back way further than that. All right. So, anyways, I was telling you about Adam and Weishaupt. So the Brotherhood of the Snake, going back, all the divisions of the mystery schools, speaks about this in the Emerald Tablets as well. They will say that the original Brotherhood and that many of the divisions of these secret societies came out of and were a result of the Crusader Wars. And that, even the Knights Templar, the Rosicrucians, the Ordo Templi Orientis, the Knights of Malta, these different ancient secret societies, that they had their roots in what were the Crusades, and that the Crusader Wars were a benevolent, that they were trying to gain hold of and regain power and authority over Jerusalem and the land there surrounding. But that what they were really trying to get after and gain access to was Solomon's treasure, which had been buried under the ground. And that even after the Crusades, instead of that, when the Christians took over and when the Muslims took over, they built on right on top of what was already there. And that many of the structures going back to that time are still buried over what is the modern city. And even though there are many ancient parts of the city which have been found and have been preserved, much of the old city or the ancient city is still under the ground and has not seen the light of day since the early time. And this goes back to, as well, the various judgments that were brought upon the fallen angel. Oh my goodness, it's 6:20. I'm going to have to do a follow-up, part 2. I apologize. We're quickly running out of time. Somebody just sent me a note saying that the fallen angels are those who went back in time to procreate with the ancestors, creating a genetic paradox. This is presented as the serpent biting its own tail. Actually, no, the Ouroboros is something that is an astronomical situation, and it's the spiral universes and how that the spiral galaxies have a circular motion, and also how time and infinity is cyclical or circular in motion, and that and how comes things repeat upon themselves. The fallen angels are those that were banished out of the heavens on the second day because of the revealing of the sun, and were later joined by the watcher angels, and they are the ones that are cited as by Enoch in his testimony. But anyways, yeah, I know there's a lot of people that, believe that the fallen angels are time travelers, but they were ones that were kicked out of our very ancient past, and they've been here since that time. They're not from the future. Although you'll hear that will be part of the strong delusion as well, and that will be set up. But anyways, I won't be able to cover much more of what I've just been talking about. I will set up another show where, next week I'll be covering as the days of Noah were, and I will be tying in the prior times with what is our current condition on the planet today, because Christ spoke about as the days of Noah were, so shall it be in the days of the second coming of the Son of Man. So I'm going to help you to understand more of that. But here's a real quick passage that talks about the Brotherhood of the Darkness from long ago. It says this: long ages ago, the sons of morning descending found the world filled with night. There in that past time began the struggle, the age-old battle of darkness and light. Many in that time were so filled with darkness that only feebly flamed the light from the night. Some there were masters of darkness who sought to fill all with their darkness, sought to draw others into their night. Fiercely withstood they, the masters of brightness, fiercely fought they from the darkness of night. Sought they ever to tighten the fetters, the chains that bind man to the darkness of night. Used they always the dark magic, brought into man by the power of darkness, magic that enshrouds man's soul with darkness. Banded together in as order, brothers of darkness, they through the ages, antagonists, they to the children of men, walk they always secret and hidden, found yet not found by the children of men. Forever they walked and worked in darkness, hiding from the light in the darkness of night. Silently, secretly, they used their power, enslaving and binding the souls of men. So that's just a real small passage from, I believe it's the 6th tablet of the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. For those that have not heard about those tablets, they supposedly go back to the time of Atlantis, the destruction of Atlantis, which is another judgment that was brought on by the Father and the Son for their interdiction into the affairs of what was the primordial world during that time. But anyways, we'll pick up more about this. I think with the time that we have remaining, I want to play that gore clip that I played in that show on the ancient aliens on Mars. For those that don't know about this clip, this will give you an interesting perspective. And this is from Rush Limbaugh speaking about the people on Mars and their connections to the Freemasons of today. God bless all. Do join me this coming Wednesday. Our show on Revolution Radio is now on Wednesday evenings, 8 to 10 p.m. And I'm going to find out how you can join us through the phone. God bless all. Good night.
As I mentioned recently, ladies and gentlemen, after reviewing data from one of the Mars rovers, NASA, big press conference the other day, concluded that Mars was once drenched with enough water to support life in a good, habitable environment. And despite, this is an incredible discovery, and NASA still had to go out there and say that there's no proof that life existed. All they said was that conditions were there for there to be life. But this is not all NASA said, ladies and gentlemen. There's a lot that is not being discussed here. As a powerful, influential member of the media, I know more than you do, especially about this. I have seen a highly classified report that has not been released publicly, and it probably won't be unless you consider my talking about it here to be releasing it publicly. It's top secret report, codenamed the Gore Report. It was prepared by scientists from Area 52 in New Mexico. They analyzed the Mars data. And there are some findings in this report, and I can understand why they don't want to release this, but I want to, and I don't know it all, but I want to pass off what some of the Gore report says. There was life on Mars. That's what NASA is not being upfront about. There was life up there. Everybody knows it. We can't be the only people occupying the universe. It's impossible. Who do we think we are? We're the only people God created? Sorry, for those of you who don't believe in God, only people who evolved from apes? So it's clear that there was life elsewhere, and now that NASA's kind of let the cat out of the bag, if there were habitable conditions up there, we know there was life there. In fact, they found some DNA evidence up there that compares favorably to members of the Skull and Bones Society here on Earth. These people were highly industrialized, the Martians. They were technologically superior, and they were very arrogant people. And they thought that the power and the force of their existence was all that was needed to sustain them. And they didn't care a whit about conservation. They didn't care a whit about preserving anything. They got rid of everything that was pristine. They used the internal combustion engine. They were globalists. They got rid of all the countries on that planet, and they had just one giant society, and the powerful, rich just absorbed everything they needed from the best parts of the planet, used it for themselves, and everybody basically suffered until everybody died out, because what happened was there were no checks and balances. Probably, I don't know this, there probably wasn't any campaign finance reform to restrict the corruption in their elective circumstances there. And so special interest groups and multinationals who escape taxes by forming offshore accounts. There's no coincidence in the fact that they found water, lots of water, where the habitable conditions were, because it dovetails with what's in the report about some of these multinationals abandoning their own countries and locating offshore for all of the nefarious reasons. They had rainforests. You're not hearing about this. They had ancient rainforests. They had jungles. They had so much oil and gas. They had reserves out the wazoo. In fact, one of the things they found on Mars is that there are still, it's possible that there's still some there, tiny little amounts. But it's clear. You saw the pictures from Mars. I saw the skeletons. At least I saw the fossils of the skeletons. There were people there, or there were beings there. But it looked like Pompeii. It looked like these people all died huddled together, and they were just swarmed in an instant. They were one day there and then gone. So many people living close together, it has to have been the result of urban sprawl. Nobody had any space. Nobody had any room, and you could tell it. I saw it from the pictures that they released. It's clear, ladies and gentlemen, Mars was once it was once the jewel of the solar system, and it was raped. Mars was raped. This is what NASA knows. This is what the Gore report says. Mars was raped by robber barons. Capitalism, dependence on combustible engines led to global warming. The ecosystem that sustained everybody was destroyed. That's why the water they've found is at the equator area. The ice caps melted. Exactly what's happening here, folks. Exactly what's happening here. These people were advanced. Not everybody on Mars died. This is what's fascinating about this report. Not everybody on Mars died. Some were able to flee. Some were able to get off the planet. This is what they can't afford to release. UFOs, yep. All these sightings, all of these blinking lights, all these unexplained things, they're real. That's why they're calling this Area 52. Those are Martians escaping the destruction. I think it goes way back, before we were alive. These UFOs have been happening all over. It may well be that the bright star that guided the three wise men was a UFO. Tax cuts absolutely were a factor. That's what the offshore thing was all about. Yeah, of course tax cuts were a factor. But the elites got off. The elites were able to travel in space. The elite, there weren't very many of them, but they were able to get off. They fled the planet in time. The stunning thing about the Mars report, the Gore report, is that they're here. These people that destroyed Mars are here. They are on Earth, folks. They are in America. They work at Halliburton. They worked at Enron. They worked at WorldCom. They're at Boeing. They came to America, my friends. And the Gore report clearly illustrates they have not learned a thing from their experiences on Mars. The truth is out there. Far, far out there.